over time, your reps will accumulate records that may be disqualified, have incorrect information, or otherwise no longer have any recent activity, and you need a way to regularly sweep these records from their owner so that they can focus on, let's say, the most engaged records. So one example is if records have remained in the same stage or have not received any activity within a certain amount of time, say the past 60 days, you would like to sweep those records away from active reps and let's say assign them to a marketing queue instead, where they can be targeted by your nurture campaigns. One way to do this is to create a nightly recurring scheduled routing job to identify records that have not had any activity within the past 60 days, and then send them through a graph that sweeps them into a nurture queue for marketing activity. There are a few things that we'll need to set up. The first is we need to identify a date field to reference as our starting point. So when does that 60 days begin? For our purposes, I'll just use the default last activity date field. Next, we'll need some intended owner, like a marketing queue, to reassign these records to. In our case, we have a queue that I've named marketing nurture that we can use to hold these quote unquote expired leads. We'll also need a graph that our recurring routing job can reference for the purpose of regularly reassigning these records. So here I have a graph whose sole purpose is to assign records to that marketing nurture queue. And you can see I've just used the new lead entry node, and that connects to an assign record node. And this assign record node just assigns records to the marketing nurture queue. Please note this is not the live graph, but simply a draft that I've saved. So now let's go ahead and create our scheduled routing job. So from the Lean Data dashboard, I'll go to routing and then routing scheduler. And once I'm on this page, I'll click create routing job. And let's go ahead and enter a job name. Let's call this one reassign expired records. And then I'll have to select a flow builder graph. In my case, I'm going to select that special draft that's made for the sole purpose of reassigning these expired records. And once I've selected that, I'll select my trigger. Now, the only trigger node in that graph is the new lead entry node. So I'll use that. And there's only one edge for that. For job type, I'll select recurring, and then I'll set my start date. Let's start that on the first available date. Then for frequency, let's do this daily. And let's do that at midnight. So each day the job will run and look for records that meet the following conditions. So the next thing that I need to do is actually to build my SOQL conditions. So typically you're able to use the build SOQL conditions button here and then form your queries using dropdowns. But in this particular case, since we're dealing with relative dates, we're actually going to have to use an actual SOQL query. So here's what we'll do. We're going to switch to freeform if you're not there already. And then you'll notice that there is already a condition here for converted equals false because we're not dealing with any converted leads. And here what we're going to do is enter our date field. In our case, that's last activity date, then equals, and then we're going to use a date literal n underscore days underscore ago colon 60. So essentially what is going on here is that when this runs, it will look for any lead records that are firstly unconverted, which have a last activity date of exactly 60 days ago. Now you can also use other date functions like last n days or even look for all values that are older than that. But just to restrict how many records go through this particular job, I'm using a more specific query here because the intention is to run this job every day. So this is a way to limit the scope of the records, the number of records that go through each iteration of this job. You'll probably have other filters that you want to add as well. So once you form your query here, order by doesn't really matter. That's optional. Limits is optional as well, but if you wanted to, you could also further restrict the number of records that can go through this job. And then lastly here, you can leave merge duplicates, notifications, and respect schedules off because we're not even using any of those in this particular job. Okay, once you're satisfied with all the criteria here, go ahead and in the upper right, click Save and Schedule. And then now every evening at midnight, there will be a job that runs to look for all unconverted leads that have a last activity date of precisely 60 days ago, and will get routed through your reassignment graph and then get them assigned to your marketing nurture queue. And every day that will repeat itself for the next batch of newly expired records. And that is the way that these records will get reassigned. Now, this method can be used for other regular reassignment needs, like reassigning disqualified records or even for redistributing a portion of an account executive's account list on a regular basis. Well, I hope that helps.